So the first few moments, I remember leaving the MTC, going to California. It was called the California Riverside Mission. We left at like 2 in the morning from the MTC in Provo to go catch our flight. That was maybe 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. And so we flew out to the Ontario, California airport. And again, we were so tired all day. And I remember like the first thing that we noticed, besides everyone using iPads and cell phones when we got to the airport, we're like, wow, everybody's doing that. This is not the MTC. This is real life for missionaries. We're here in California. We were so excited. But the first thing I noticed was palm trees everywhere. There's so many palm trees, and there's no palm trees where I'm from in Texas. And so, like, we were just excited. When we saw the palm trees, we knew this is real, this is California. And so we got there, we went to the mission office the first day. We ended up spending the whole day at the mission office. And different missions do it different ways. I know later on in my mission they did it differently to where you didn't stay at the mission office, partly because the missions changed. And so when I got there, we unloaded all the luggage, and it was hot compared to Utah. It was in the summertime. Utah was nice and cool that morning, and then we got to California, it was super hot, and we were unloading all the luggage. And I remember me and some other missionaries that helped unload the luggage were all sweaty from doing that and taking them into the church. But then they're like, well, we're going to start the interviews with the president right away too. And so they called me up, and I was the first one. And I was like, I'm so sweaty. This is my first impression with my mission president. I was so nervous. And I remember I had like this handkerchief that I'd carried around, and I was like batting my head because trying to collect myself after being in the sun. And it was a really great experience to meet my mission president for the first time. And then we had driving tests, and so they got everything logistically figured out that mission at the mission office that day. And then by the end of the day, we were introduced to our trainers and assigned to our areas. And what I didn't know when I was called to this mission was that there was about to be a mission split. And so by the end of the night, we would know which mission we would be in, because the split was about to happen in a few weeks with all the opening of the new missions. And so the Redlands mission was opened up. And I thought for sure, I was like, I feel good about Riverside. I'm probably going to stay in Riverside. That's like where I felt like I was supposed to be. Little did I know, though, I would be assigned to Redlands as my first area, Redlands and Loma Linda, and that would be in the Redlands mission. And so that first night, it was kind of a shock, first of all, because I didn't expect to be in a mission. Like, I'd been preparing so much for Riverside. I was so hyped for that. And then I also drove home. My companion didn't have a license, and so I drove that first transfer of my mission. And I was so tired because we woke up at 2 in the morning, and we were driving at like 9:30 at night, and we'd been going all day. And so I was a lot was going through my mind, and it was dark on the road, and so that was pretty much the first day. When we got back, we just kind of planned for the next day. We prayed, and I unpacked, planned for the next day, and that was that. But then the next day, that was our first day of full proselyting. And what happened that day? I remember studying that day. I was so lost. I didn't know what to study. I didn't know how to study as a missionary. Now I have an hour, and then companion study was happening. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. I remember like it just had colored pencils, and I was just marking stuff in my scriptures, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I just reading the Book of Mormon. But we had like a lot of lessons prepared that day. I had a really great first companion, and he had everything scheduled out, and he had people planned to come with us. We had a young man come out with us for our lesson. And the first lesson, I couldn't have gotten a better first experience like into teaching. We met with some people who, one was a recent convert, and her mom was less active, and then in that lesson, unexpectedly, they invited their neighbors who lived downstairs to come up and listen. And so we ended up teaching them too, and they ended up committing to be baptized that day for a certain day. So it was like, it was an awesome first lesson. You really couldn't beat it. And that day went great too. I remember going to this one home and they had like taco salad, and it was awesome. And the guy served in Norway, and he had really funny stories from his mission. And so that was the first day. And again, I was super tired. That whole first week was just really tiring. You get used to it after a while, but I was also, I don't know if other missionaries felt this way, but I was a little bit stressed because you want to help so much, but you don't know the area. And so, like, you don't know the members to call, you don't know what you're doing. And so my companion did a good job at helping me to adjust to that. But I felt like once I get to Sunday, that I can meet the ward, and then I can feel real, like I'm actually in some place. You feel like at the Twilight Zone for the first few days until you can actually meet everyone. And so that's kind of how I felt. The second day, however, if I remember right, was like the total opposite of the first day. Like, it felt like everything fell through, and people started arguing with us, and it probably would have been easy to feel discouraged, but again, I had a good companion who was positive about all those things, and so it was just, both days were good experiences though in the long run. And another thing that I felt like the first week, I was so nervous to talk with everyone. My companion was really good at just like talking to people on the street, and that's what they called OIMs, open your mouth. And so that was a new experience for me, is to be able to just talk to anyone on the street about the gospel. And so, yeah, that was that. And they had training meetings too for the new missionaries, to see how the missionaries are doing, and to just help you get adjusted. They have like everything you need. And the 12-week training too, I remember that. I really enjoyed it. They have this program, the first 12 weeks for the missionaries, and you have an extra hour of companionship study just dedicated to that. So to help you to really understand how to teach and the material that you teach. And so it's a good program. And they also have the district videos, which really helped prepare. Yeah, so I guess along the lines of preparing for my mission, again, the MTC had sent out online training that they do. Like, there's a website and videos that you watch, and they tell you to do certain things. That helped a lot in preparation for the MTC. And it gives you an idea of what it's like to be a missionary. And at least in the United States, I've heard other missionaries say that, oh, that's not how it's like in the district. So the first few weeks was a different adjustment, because we knew that it was going to be a new mission after about 2 or 3 weeks. We were about to get a new mission president, and I had just met my first mission president. And so again, I was really nervous to meet this mission president, and we had interviews with him, and he came out. And when I met my new mission president, President Van Cott, that's when I feel like I really felt good about the Redlands mission. I felt like that was where I was supposed to be, even though I thought in my mind Riverside was the real mission for me. I just felt a spiritual confirmation that I was supposed to be with President Van Cott and his family and learn from them. And so it was a little bit different. With a new mission, they had different standards and rules. One of them being, in the Redlands mission, we didn't tract at all. Not that we really did in the Riverside mission. I probably tracted once, but that was a new thing, and there was an emphasis on not as much street contacting, which we still did, but just more focus on working with members and how to do that well. And so that was something that was a big change, and all of that was just an adjustment. So in the California Redlands Mission, there was a pretty good foundation of membership. There's 7 stakes in it, if I remember right. yeah, I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's 7. There's one temple, which was nice because that's like the temple for the area, is the Redlands Temple. The closest ones outside of that are Newport Beach and San Diego and Los Angeles. But even then, it's at least 60, 70 miles away. And so it's nice to have a temple that's like right at the headquarters of the mission. There was anywhere between like 190 to 220 missionaries, I'd say. I could be wrong, but like there's also a pretty good balance of elders and sisters. At one point, there was almost more sisters than elders. We were getting so many sisters with the influx of missionaries. With that, there's about 7 zones, 7 stakes. There's about that many zones for the mission, and it's so yeah. The church, most areas are wards. There's a few branches. There's like one English branch that's out in the mountains, just because it's kind of far away. And there's maybe a couple Spanish branches. Actually, one of the Spanish branches actually became a ward maybe about a year ago. And so that's that. There's Spanish speaking and English speaking. Those are the calls that they issue for the Redlands Mission. And so there's Spanish units and English units. There's also some Polynesian units. There's 1 Tongan ward, and then 2 Samoan wards and a Samoan branch. And there are mostly car areas and biking areas. Occasionally there will be a walking area for sisters if it's a small, safe geographical area. But the mission itself, half of it, about half the stakes, are in kind of a suburban area. The cities that the mission covers are from west to east. It goes Fontana, that's a stake. Rialto is a stake. San Bernardino, Redlands and Highland, Yucaipa, then Palm Desert, and Yucca Valley. And so once you get out to Yucaipa and Palm Desert and Yucca Valley, that's the desert. You go out to pretty much to Las Vegas. It stretches out. So that's the biggest geographical area, and they'll always have cars out there, pretty much. And then the other areas, Fontana, Rialto, San Bernardino, Redlands, are pretty compacted, and so like that smaller suburban area. So again, the California Redlands Mission, it kind of has a cool background because that whole area was founded by members of the church. Originally, when pioneers came to California from Utah, they pioneered that valley and that area of California, and so it has kind of like LDS roots. And there's even a place, it's just outside the mission, called Mormon Rock. But it is cool to think that you're serving in an area that was once populated mostly by Mormons, and so that's just something interesting about the mission. One really cool experience that happened was when I was in Twentynine Palms. One day we were biking along the road, and this road goes downhill, and I was in a car area like my whole mission, but for just these few weeks we had a bike because we were splitting a car between the other elders. Anyways, we were biking down this road, and then we get this like strong feeling as we passed. There was a woman and a man fixing a car on the side of the road, parked in a parking lot. We get this feeling like just stop right there and talk to them, and so we do that. And the woman recognizes us as missionaries, and we talk with her for a bit, offer to help, but then we keep talking with her and introduce the gospel, and pretty much invited her to learn more. But the name of this woman sounded really familiar, and it was just on my mind. I was like, she sounds so familiar. And so they said that we could come and teach them more, but then we went a few hours, and then when we went back to our apartment for dinner, and while I was back in my apartment, that name was still on my mind, and I was like, what is this? And so I looked for a certain letter, And so, flashback to when I was serving in the Psalm 1 ward, during that time, I don't know when it was, but it was months before this, I had a friend that was serving in Reno, California, and she's like, I'm teaching this Psalm 1 lady, and she's moving to California. I don't know where, but she's moving there, and you should go find her, because she knew I covered a big geographical area. And so I printed out that email, and I put it in my records, but I never really thought anything would come of it. I should have called her at that point, but I didn't. Anyways, so that name sounded really familiar, and I was like, is this that same lady that she talked about? And so I went back to the apartment, and during dinner, like, I found that piece, and it was the same name. It was the same lady that my friend had taught in Reno, and who had moved to California, and we just found her on the side of the road because we had a feeling to pull over. And out of all the places to find some random woman, it was in the middle of the desert. And so it just, this wave of, like, the Spirit just came over me, and I just knew that both Heavenly Father loved her and loved us and knew us and was aware of our situation and cared about our success in 29 Palms. And so that was just one miracle that has always stuck with me. Yeah. So my third area was in Indio, California. I thought I was going to stay in the valley, my whole mission, which is like those inland cities, Fontana, Rialto, San Bernardino, and Redlands. But then I went out to the desert for the first time. And Indio, it was much different than the first two areas that I served in. Things were a lot more spread out, and there was so much more sand because you're in the desert, and people there. It was actually a ward that reminded me a lot of my home ward. The families that live there, and also just the dynamic was a lot like my home ward. So I was really happy to be there too. The bishopric and the leaders in that ward were really great. I had heard really great things about that, so I was really excited to go in there and work with them. And at that time, I was only there for 2 transfers, and I had one companion for both transfers. And I actually really enjoyed being with that companion. He had served in Ukraine for most of his mission, and then had been evacuated when the missionaries were taken out of Ukraine, and he finished his mission in that area. And so I was his last companion, and we had a good time together. And in that area, the members, there's a lot of youth, and people who would come out with us a lot to help us teach. And also in that area, I'm just remembering now, it was like 98% gated communities, and so we couldn't, like, it was a little bit more difficult to, like, talk with people on the street and to, like, openly proselyte, because we had to have, like, codes and, like, passes to get into each area to visit members. And so in that area, we worked really, really hard with the members to help to try to find people to teach through them, and also to strengthen them at the same time in their desire to do missionary work. So my second area, I went to Rialto, California, to a Psalm 1 ward there. And that ward, I have a large piece of my heart that lives with that ward. I ended up serving there for about 9 transfers, which is a little over a year. And so I got to know the members very well there, and I love those people. It was a really big shock coming from one ward to another. Just the culture is different. Coming from an English ward to a Psalm 1 unit, I was still English speaking, but the members encouraged us to learn basic Psalm 1 to really fit into the culture. And so Psalm 1 people are just happy people, and they're super generous, and they love to eat. And so we ate so much at meals and things, and they'd feed us so much because they're so generous, and they love missionaries, and they love missionary work. The members in that ward are all about missionary work. Many of them are converts to the church, and many have also immigrated from Samoa to California. And so, again, traveling from in some places a third world country to the U.S. can also be take a toll on finances. And so the people there are very, very humble and very generous. And so serving in that ward was a really cool experience because we actually didn't serve in Rialto. There's 2 Samoan wards in Rialto. One that covers, it's like a donut almost, one that covers right in the middle, all of Rialto, and then one that covers like everything outside of Rialto. And so we covered geographically, went into about 3 missions, our mission, then the Riverside mission, and then I think Rancho Cucamonga, California mission. And so we drove a lot. We had a car in that area. I had a car in every area that I served in. I was lucky enough to have that. Well, I guess some people would like a bike, and so we drove a lot from places to place. The members are very spread out in that ward because they lived in so many different cities. Like a member of the bishopric lived in Rancho Cucamonga, which was outside of our mission, and then our ward mission leader lived in Eastvale, which is also out of our mission. And so it's just a fun ward to be in, and the people there love the gospel, and so they have parties and celebrate life, and they celebrate like everything that they can celebrate, they'll celebrate. And they're also very good at singing. One of my favorite things about that ward was the music. Every week, singing hymns in Samoan was beautiful. I don't know what it is, but they're so good at singing. And the language is beautiful. And so after about 7 months in that ward, I had about a companion every transfer. They come in and out, and I didn't expect to be there that long. Every transfer, after a while, you only typically stay in an area maybe 3 or 4 transfers, and so I thought I'd be the one that was leaving, but for whatever reason, I stayed, and so that at some points it was a little bit difficult to adjust to almost like help another missionary each transfer to get adjusted to the area. It was sometimes stressful because it kind of put some pressure on you, and so that was a good experience. And so about after 7 months, we started covering both of the Samoan wards, and so I got a new companion at that time, and we were then covering 2 wards. And so the other ward, which was in Rialto, and for the first time we actually started proselyting in Rialto after living there for a long time. And so that just added to that. That ward is excellent too. I love that ward, and they were so missionary minded too. They'd go out and knock doors to get their neighbors to learn about the gospel, and like they're just really great people. My 4th area, second to last area, was Twentynine Palms, California. And so I thought I had been in the desert in Indio, but when I went to Twentynine Palms, I realized that now I was really in the desert. So Twentynine Palms is the most northeast area of the mission. It covers a huge geographical area out to pretty much Las Vegas mission. Some cool things about that area, they had, I'm pretty sure, there's a town called Amboy that we covered. We never went there because it was like so far away. But that's the city that Cars, the Pixar movie, was filmed based off of. And another, well, basically this town was existed because there was a Marine base there. It's the biggest Marine base in the world, and they train most of the new Marines there. And it's huge. It just covers a lot of the desert, and they have training facilities there. And so most of the members in that ward were Marines or former Marines. They're still working on the base. And it's just a great place to be. I thought it's beautiful. Some people would say otherwise. might not like the desert as much as we did, but it's a great place to be as a missionary because there's people that are humble. It's kind of a small town when you're not on base, and so like people know each other and you see the same people all the time, and you have to, like, the closest Walmart, it was in the next town over, it was about 20 or 30 minutes away, so that's where we do our shopping, and so it was just a fun time. And so a lot of the people there, kind of like Loma Linda, my first area, it's a lot of young couples too, or young single guys who are Marines. And so that's a lot of the people that we teach is young Marines who are just coming from different parts of the world now, trying to find their way in life, just starting in the Marines, and then their friends would refer them to missionaries, and we teach them. And it was just a fun experience. It was fun to be with them. The members are really great. And also in that area we covered 2 units. There was an English ward, and then there was a Samoan branch. And so again, everything great about the Samoan wards in Rialto, we got in the Samoan branch there, and everything great about the English wards we also got. The members are just really kind. I was lucky also to be there during the winter, so that the temperature was nice and the weather was great. It is the high desert, and so, which basically means it's a little bit more windy and cold than the normal desert, and so so I kind of like the cold, so I liked it. But missionaries there in the summer will probably get maybe 100 into the 120s, I'd say, is the highest heat they'll get. But we had a truck, which was nice. We needed 4-wheel drive because sometimes you go to places that were like out in the middle of the sand. I remember one time we were going to this house and we got stuck because the roads are just off-road, and we had to go on this road. It's like, warning, this road is not kept up by the county of San Bernardino. We're like, oh no. So we just drove through because we needed to get to our place, and it just, at one point the wheels are turning and we're like, oh no, this is it. This is how it ends. Like we're just stuck here, but we made it out. And yeah, we probably should have gone a different route, but it is what it is. And so I never went out to that town that Cars was. It was like probably like an hour, at least an hour or 2 hours away, and there was no members out there, so there's no point unless you just wanted to have a fun time and go out there. But missionaries don't need to be doing that, so we never went there. So in that area in 29 Palms, teaching Marines, for the most part, they'd be there while we were there, because missionaries are typically there a shorter amount of time than Marines are, even though Marines are there for a small time. I was in that ward for 3 transfers. I had 2 companions, and actually remembering it now, I remember driving in there because they changed it. Before I got there was 2 sisters serving there, and then the mission changed a little bit, and so they put 4 elders there. It was me, and then I had a brand new missionary with me, and then another missionary, and he was with a brand new missionary too. And so we were both brand new to the area, and it took a little while to figure everything out, because coming from one area of missionaries to 2, they didn't have it divided in any way, and so it took a while to figure out how we were going to divide the area geographically to proselyte, and also we didn't know who we were going to teach, who would be teaching who, and also to find people and get to know the ward without like any. Oh, we had a basic understanding that the sisters left really good notes for us to go off of. But I remember there that first night driving there, it was dark, and so we couldn't see what 29 Palms was like, and we just felt like, wow, like filled with anxiety, like all the feelings that you have at the beginning of your mission when you go to a new area. It's pretty much the same thing. It's like, wow, this is a brand new place. This is a brand new start. It's just a time to change and recommit yourself to like it's a brand new mission. And so that's what I really loved about 29 Palms. We saw so many miracles there, and in Indio, I remember seeing a lot of miracles. But like coming there and feeling a little bit stressed at first for a few weeks, because just getting adjusted, not having anywhere to go with, not having a missionary there with you that knew the area. But coming from that and being able to work through that together, all four of us worked really hard there, and we were able to find great success. And so that was really exciting. And I think for that reason, that really like helped me to come to know the Savior more, through facing trials and overcoming through prayer and faith, helped me to really love the area and the people in that ward, and also to love the Lord more. So I really loved 29 Palms. I remember my first area, it was a summer, and it was so hot, and so we'd like survive like between lessons and everything, and the car was hot every time you touched it when you went back to it. But then one time in Rialto, I think it was in Rialto, it was just raining so much, it was like almost flooding. We didn't have too much crazy weather in my mission. It never snowed except for if you were in the mountains. But one time it rained and rained and rained like a whole week for when I was in Rialto. I remember I was with one companion, and it was like I was driving at the time and he had to back me out, but there was so much rain, he'd get soaked as he was like backing me out. It was just funny. I remember jumping through like puddles to get to certain homes with that companion. It was a really funny experience, but rain was the worst that we ever got. Some foods that I really loved, I grew to love the Samoan foods. Some people weren't as fond of it, but like there's a banana that they had, they called it fa'i, and I loved fa'i, and also rice, taro, which is like a root, is like a potato, kind of. It's like potato slash bread almost. It's really starchy, and it's kind of purple. And I love that. I also love sapasui. Some cultures call it chop suey. It's like, I don't know what kind of noodle it is, but it's like a clear noodle, and they put different vegetables, and it's kind of like a stir fry almost, like a bunch of soy sauce in it. That's really good. A lot of stir fry in the Samoan ward. Other wards is pretty much American food. The strangest thing I had was in one area we had turkey tail, which I wasn't super fond of. It was alright, but I probably wouldn't eat it outside, like on my own choice. Like I wouldn't go out and buy turkey tail just to make it. It's kind of a euphemism for that end of the turkey. It's a delicacy in some cultures. So for one, going along with food, I felt like my palate for food like increased so much. Now I'll eat like anything. Like I love food now in different cultures, and also being able to talk with people and try to be positive. I felt like communication skills really increased, because you're with different companions who communicate differently 24/7. But on top of that, you're also working with different members who come from a lot of different backgrounds and non-members, and trying to work with people. So I felt like communication skills, a lot of those, I felt like I developed on my mission. And also, like along with that, listening, being able to listen to people and care about them more. I felt like even that's a skill, to love people more, that I felt like developed on my mission. This is kind of a funny question, because I feel like I'm also a recently returned missionary, but it goes by so fast. It's been like over 8 months now, so maybe I'm not. But some advice I remember that people told me is to stay busy, like to stay involved in the church and activities, and just always doing good things. That was one companion of mine told me that, and he'd been home for over a year, I think. And actually that really helped, to keep doing things, stay engaged in the work, and don't take a break, kind of the vibe that I got. Don't just lazify yourself, if that's a word. Be lazy. Don't just be lazy and sit around all day, but go out and do stuff. I knew one person that went to the temple from the first week that he got home, and when I saw him months later, like, he just had a huge light on him, and that was something that helped me. And also to get engaged with the missionaries right away. That was something I did. I had a friend right home from my mission that we had talked very briefly over my mission, but I really wanted him to meet with the missionaries, and so that he could have the blessings of the gospel. And so right away, after coming home, like, I had a lot of desires. I think a lot of missionaries have desires to have their friends have the gospel right when they come home. And so I would say follow those desires, because that was an incredible experience for me, learning to what it was like on the other side, not being a missionary, but being the member with the missionaries, teaching a friend. That was a really cool experience. And so I would suggest missionaries follow the promptings of the names that come to your mind to invite. And whether or not they accept the gospel is up to the person, but I mean, you learn that throughout your mission, but the experience is worth it. And so continue to invite your friends to do things. Also, keep reading the scriptures, because there's a strong temptation not to, or to find that you're too busy, but it's definitely something that's needed, is to study the scriptures regularly, actually daily, and to just immerse yourself in good things. Also, dating, as like everybody says that, but it's a good thing, and you're going to be awkward for a while. I can't promise you when that's going to wear off, but it just do it, and you'll get better at it. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's my advice. I remember the night that it was my halfway mark on my mission, and it's kind of a point on your mission where you think, like, who am I? Where am I going? Like, how have I been as a missionary? Who do I want to be by the time I finish? Kind of like a mid-life crisis, but it's a mid-mission crisis. And so a lot was on my mind, and I was kind of overwhelmed with just a mix of feelings that night. And I remember praying that night that just praying and talking with Heavenly Father and expressing all those feelings that I had, and the different worries that were on my mind and concerns I had. And I can't remember everything I prayed about, but what I do remember is, as I did that just this overwhelming feeling of peace came into my mind, and it was almost as if, like, my dad was hugging me. Like, there were moments that I remembered where I just had really good, like, talks with my dad before my mission, and like instances where I had a really good hug with him, and that's what it felt like. It was somebody was hugging me and telling me that everything was going to be okay, and that he loved me. And yeah. So advice that I would have, or just suggestions that I would have, one thing that comes to my mind is, with stuff, you're advised in the missionary handbook not to keep that much stuff, and I would also advise that, like, only have what you need. There's a lot of missionaries who will carry stuff around that they just don't need. Too many ties, too many of whatever. Just keep the essentials and keep a light load. Live simply, and you'll be happier. You'll be less cluttered, and you'll be able to keep the dignity of your calling, because your house will be clean. And so, along with that, live clean too. Clean your place. Like, when it gets dirty, you don't have a mom there to clean it for you. And so just be a clean person and use good hygiene. Write in your journal is another thing you should do. I didn't do as well as I should have, but I regret it. So avoid the regret and just write in your journal. Also, with letters home, something that they kind of emphasized in my mission was, be a positive example, like, to your family. Some people don't have a perfect family situation at home, and their letters can really mean a lot to them. I knew really great missionaries who their family weren't really strong members of the church or had left the church, but their letters, constant every week, filled with miracles. And I guess my mission president and his wife would talk about living on a higher plane of thought and activity. That's what it says in the mission call letter or something like that. And so keeping your thoughts and your actions on a higher plane, and like as a missionary, not just as a young man, but as a missionary, in everything that you do will help you to be successful, but also you'll be a great example to your family and friends back home. And you'll also have a great collection of miracles that you've written about, and positive things, and you won't look back and regret negative things that you've said about the areas, but you'll be grateful for all the things that you did do. Like looking at the world through rose-colored glasses is what my sister would say. So also, when you get white shirts that are dirty, just change them because you look better. Because missionaries will wear the same white shirts for a long time. They'll get gray and gross, and so just don't be afraid to invest some money and just get some new white shirts. Wash your clothes regularly. In my mission, I was told to bring 1 suit. I think now they say 2. So the mission call packet usually does a pretty good job. And I think my mission now is iPads too. So I don't know what to tell you about that. I can't give any suggestions. Along the lines of preparing and studying, I think this just takes time. But for me, it took a while to kind of get into a rhythm of how I studied. I used different methods of study journals. What I kind of came down to was having a notebook with different dividers for the different chapters of Preaching My Gospel, and that really helped for me, and it worked. And it took like many months to develop a system, but as long as you have something that works, and by a system I mean keeping a study journal, then you'll better be able to record revelation and meet the needs of your investigators and remember things throughout the day. Don't just study and then let it drain out. Write the things down that come to your mind.
So I flew to California from the MTC, and I got picked up by the mission president and the APs, and it was overwhelming. We spent the first night in the mission home, and then I met my trainer. And my trainer he had been in the mission for a long time. He was almost going home, actually. And I remember hearing him take a call of an investigator and speaking to her in Spanish. I could barely understand what he was saying. I was so confused. I was like, how can you speak that fast? It was cool. It was very overwhelming at first, especially when I got to my area and started working. I remember after the first week thinking, oh my goodness, like if this 1 week felt so long, I don't think there's any way I could do 2 whole years of this. Just because it was so go, like working all the time, and it's exhausting. So the first week is a bit of an adjustment. I worked really hard on it in the MTC. In the MTC, if you're learning a language, what they usually do is they tell you to try to speak it all the time, as much as you possibly can, even if you don't know very much. Because just the more you speak it, the more you'll just get used to it, and the more you'll learn, because you're practicing translating your thoughts into that language. And so I took that to heart, and I worked really hard at it. And so by the time I got out of the MTC, I could have a pretty decent conversation with somebody. Of course, there were lots of words I didn't understand, but I felt like I hit the ground running in that regard. And just the more that I practiced it, I kept trying to do that as much as I could throughout the mission. And so the more that I did that, the smoother it became. And so I would say, it's hard to say that there's a specific time when you're fluent. It's more of a process. So I would say probably within 3, 4, 5 months, after the mission, I was pretty solid. After I left the MTC, I was pretty solid. So, and you just keep getting better as you practice and work at it. When I got my mission call, the letter said the California San Bernardino Mission. That's in Southern California, a couple hours east of LA. I was originally at the San Bernardino Mission. Later on, like I said, they created a bunch of new missions, and one of those was the Redlands Mission. The Redlands Mission was created in June 2013, so I was about 8 months into my mission. And so I spent most of my mission in the Redlands Mission. And so there's actually a temple in Redlands. It's a really pretty temple. It's smaller than most of the temples in Utah, or some of the bigger temples. It's one of the smaller ones, but it's a beautiful temple. There are palm trees everywhere, mountains. I didn't expect it to be as mountainous as it was. And then a good part of the mission actually is in the desert. So there's Redlands, which is in the San Bernardino Valley. Then once you keep going further east, it gets more and more deserty as you go. And I spent most of my mission out in the desert, in the communities of Palm Desert, Palm Springs, Desert Hot Springs. And it's sandy, brown desert. Although the resort community of Palm Desert has, these lush golf courses, and it's like a golf course retirement community basically. So it's a pretty nice place. But yeah, I really liked it. Most people say that Redlands, San Bernardino area is the ugly part of California. I guess I wouldn't know any better because I haven't been to any other parts. But I think it's a beautiful place, and just by virtue of serving there and being there so long, you become more attached to it. So interesting fact, actually, San Bernardino was founded by Mormon settlers. When Brigham Young took everybody to Salt Lake, some people went down to California and formed a little colony thing in San Bernardino. So it was originally founded by Mormons. And then there was a point in time where Brigham Young tried to call everybody back to Utah. So most of the people went back to Utah. And so San Bernardino kind of went on in its own path. But yeah, so kind of interesting history there. It was founded by Mormons. In the first mission I was in, the San Bernardino mission, we went every other transfer. So about once every 3 months or so. And we would go through an endowment session in the temple. Later on, when the new mission president came, the new mission was formed, we went a little bit less frequently. We would just go basically whenever they would announce one, so I went a few more times. But yeah, we would just go through and do a session. And I guess the most meaningful temple experience for me on my mission was before you go home, there's a special departing missionary temple trip where all the missionaries who are leaving that transfer go through the temple with the mission president. And so I went through with my mission president, President Van Cott, and I just remember that it was a very meaningful experience for me because I was towards the end of my mission. I was going to be going home in a week or so, and I was just wanting to know if the Lord accepted the sacrifice that I had made. And so I was praying in the celestial room and praying to know if the Lord accepted my sacrifice. And basically right as I finished the prayer, my mission president came up to me and gave me a hug, and he just said, "We really appreciate all your work and all you've done here." So that was a meaningful experience for me. And so there are 7 stakes in the Redlands mission: San Bernardino, Rialto, Fontana, Yucaipa, Yucca Valley, Palm Desert, Redlands, obviously. There are 7 stakes, and every stake is its own. Typically every stake is its own zone, although that mixes up from time to time, but that doesn't really matter. So usually there are missionaries and wards. In my experience, there are usually at least 2 sets of missionaries per ward. Spanish-speaking missionaries are only assigned to Spanish-speaking wards and branches, which are usually bigger. So the Spanish wards overlap over the English wards. So we have an English ward and maybe another English ward, and the Spanish ward will cover both of those 2. Yeah, usually 2 to 3 sets of missionaries per ward or branch. I was in Rialto, my first area. It was my second companion. We were teaching a family, and we taught them, and things were going great. It was just wonderful. They ended up getting baptized, and they moved to another ward, so we kind of lost contact with them. But while we were in the process of teaching them, we started talking to the landlord and his family. His name was Pedro Rivera. Started talking to him and his family, and they expressed a little bit of interest. And so we came back a few times and taught them. And then eventually we invited them to come to church. They said they would. We arranged a ride for them. A member went over there to pick them up, and they said, "No, we'll just go on our own." And they didn't go. And so we figured, okay, they're not interested. Like they don't want to go to church, So we kind of stopped teaching them for a while. My companion got transferred. I got a new companion. I was starting to train now. So it's a couple months later. During district meeting, we get a call from Pedro Rivera, and he leaves us a message saying, "I want you to come back and teach me again." That's something that doesn't happen very often. So we did, and we started teaching him, and the situation was totally different this time. He had just lost his job. He was having problems, and he was, looking more to God for answers. So we started teaching him about the Book of Mormon, and his family started listening. We started teaching his wife, and he had 2 daughters, Victoria and Dayanara, just, beautiful little daughters. So we started teaching all them, and they just started coming to church. They started meeting some members, and really embraced the gospel. They had so much faith. I remember they didn't have a car, and so I think we told them to pray for a car, and so they started praying, and then like the next week they somehow got a car, and they asked me to give a blessing on their minivan because it was a new minivan, and it wasn't new, but it was new for them, and they asked me to give a blessing on it. So I was like, okay, I don't see why not. And he got a job within a week or 2 weeks. Shortly after we started teaching him again, he got another job. And so the Lord just blessed them so much as they started embracing the restored gospel. So I got transferred out of the area a week or 2 before they got baptized, but I was able to go back and see their baptism. And they called me Cris because Christensen is hard to pronounce if you're a native Spanish speaker. So they just call me Cris. And I remember, this is one image that I'll just always have in my memory, is as I walked into the chapel that day, little Dayanara, she's like 4 years old, this adorable little girl, just runs up to me and throws her arms around my knees and says, "Cris!" I mean, that just melts your heart. And so they were baptized, and one of the greatest honors I've received, actually, they asked me to give Dayanara her name in blessing because she was too young to be baptized. So I gave her naming blessing, which was a very spiritual experience. And it was really quite an honor to do that. I wrote them a couple times, and it was just, we'd kind of fall out of contact as time goes on. But I heard this week, actually, they were sealed in the temple. So that's something that just gives me a lot of satisfaction and a lot of joy, knowing that somebody that I worked really hard with, and that someone that God sent me to introduce them to the gospel, they are now an eternal family. And my favorite area was Palm Desert. I was there for 7 months in the middle of my mission. It's a pretty wealthy area. It's like a retirement community, basically. A lot of people from Washington, Canada, Oregon will come down in the winter. Because in the winter there, it's beautiful. Sunny skies, blue skies, hardly any clouds, 70 degrees, 75 every day, very consistent. It's a great winter. You couldn't ask for a better winter. And I was there around Christmas time, and I was Skyping my family on Christmas time, on Christmas Day, and my family is in Ohio, and I'm in California, and that was one of the worst winters in Ohio at that point in time. They had all this snow, and it was terrible weather, and I'm like, it's really nice, beautiful over here, sunny sky, 75. So beautiful area, palm trees everywhere. You wouldn't believe how many golf resorts there are. Like, you just drive down the streets, golf club, golf course, country club, everywhere. Pretty ritzy area, lots of fancy restaurants. So most of the people that I taught as a Spanish-speaking missionary were the people who were working in those fancy restaurants, working in the hotels, working in the golf courses. That was where they got their livelihood. And it was hard for them in the summertime, because in the summertime nobody wants to be there as a tourist. People just go back home to Canada or whatever. Because in the summertime it can get up to 120 degrees. It's always over 100 every day. Usually it's around 105, 110 every day. Sometimes up to 120 if you're lucky. I actually lived in the most comfortable apartment in the mission. So I had it pretty lucky. I only had three areas, which is kind of unusual. I was in each one for a long period of time. And in each of those three apartments, I had my own washer and dryer in the apartment. Just nice apartments, basically. So I had it pretty lucky. My favorite area in Palm Desert, we had a pretty nice apartment. Pretty big, too. There were 2 bedrooms, a good-sized living room. It's easily twice as big as the apartment I'm living in now at BYU, and a lot nicer, too. I basically had a car my entire mission. So I bought a bike beforehand because I think the mission president sends you out a letter before you go, and it will say you should do this or that. And I think mine said I should buy a bike. So I bought a bike, and I had it sent out to the mission office, and I used it for 3 days out of 2 years. Because I was in a lot of the Spanish-speaking areas, since they're bigger, usually get a car. Our mission president, though, made a big emphasis on trying to reduce the amount of time you're in the car, because when you're in the car, you can't really talk to people in the street, you're not really teaching anybody, you're basically shut off. And so he would say, park a little further away, try to walk more, so you just see more people, and so people are seeing you, and it makes a big difference. You can just have a lot more missionary experiences that way. I mean, we would drive pretty big distances sometimes, and try to park further away, so nice cars too, new cars. So I served Spanish speaking, and most of the food I got was delicious. Authentic Mexican food, it's the best. You typically get chicken, rice, and beans with a big old stack of tortillas. They always serve you soda at every meal, like sometimes it's manzanita, which is a great apple flavored soda, Fanta, whatever, Shasta. Delicious meals like flautas, which are like basically taquitos, tacos, enchiladas, tamales, all sorts of delicious Mexican food. Well, obviously it's California, so most people speak English. Most of the missionaries are English-speaking missionaries. But in the areas where I served, which were Rialto, Palm Desert, and Palm Springs, there are big enough concentrations of Spanish-speaking people to where you can basically spend all day speaking Spanish. The biggest thing I would say, though, was just speaking Spanish with my companion. We would try to speak it generally throughout the day. Of course, there are times you speak English and whatever. It's not like you're, But most of the time, you generally try to make an effort to speak Spanish to each other. That was what we did. And that was what helped the most, because then it's not so much trying to adjust shifting from one to the other. If you're always kind of in Spanish mode and you try to keep your brain in Spanish mode, then when you go to those lessons and you talk to those people, it just flows a lot better. So making that effort, most of the time when you contact someone on the street, you'll start in English, because odds are they speak English. And if they don't, they'll be like, oh, no speak English. And you're like, qué bien, hablamos español. Sometimes they use that as an excuse to try to get out of talking to you, and then you're like, I speak Spanish too. If you're going to speak Spanish and you're not in the MTC yet, I would say, or whatever language, I would say study as much as you can before you go. I got like a CD lesson thing and listened to it in the car as I drove around. And you may not learn a ton, but the point is you'll get yourself in the mode of studying it, and you'll learn a little bit more about how conversations work. Because when you go to the MTC, you'll spend just all day, every day studying Spanish, basically. So you might as well get used to it and learn as much as you can before, because it's not like there's a magical thing where you go to the MTC and all of a sudden you know Spanish. It takes work. To those who are preparing to serve as missionaries, I would say go out with the missionaries, teach with them, study your scriptures every day, say your prayers. Because that's what you tell people to do. Read the Book of Mormon every day. Pray about it. Pray about the Book of Mormon. If you have a testimony, if you don't have a testimony, if you want your testimony to be stronger, if you already have a strong testimony, it doesn't matter. Pray about the Book of Mormon. And pray to know it's true. Pray for the people you're going to teach. Pray for help in preparing, and pray about the scriptures, and go to church and go to the temple. I mean, all the things that people tell you to do they tell you to do it for a reason. And there's a reason why the prophets are telling us to do these things. It's because that's how you draw closer to God. I just want to say how grateful I am that I did serve and how much it's meant to me. It's the most difficult experience I've ever had. There are some days where you wake up and you don't want to go out there. There are a lot of days you wake up and you don't want to go out there. It's tough. It's hard to go out there every day and walk for miles and in the hot sun and talk to people who don't want to listen to you. But those moments, like with the Familia Rivera that I mentioned earlier, or with a number of other families that I could talk about, Hernandez Lopez, Bogarin, Guillen, these are people that you always have in your heart. People that you always remember, and you just never forget. Even if you fall out of communication, there's always that bond that you have, and just seeing how their lives change, seeing how their lives become better and happier because of the gospel, and whether or not people accept the gospel, you love them. People that you're teaching, you just love them no matter what. Definitely the most difficult experience of my life, but definitely the most meaningful experience too. And it's changed a lot about who I am, made me a much better person. There are days when I think about, how did I do that for 2 whole years? How could I possibly have done that? I think about how I got up out of bed every day and just worked my butt off every day, and I think, how did I even do that? How is that even possible? And it's because of God's strength that was with me. I know that God watches out for you when you're a missionary. He takes care of you, and He blesses you when you get back. He blesses you when you're there. Had we not served missions, our lives would be totally different right now. And they wouldn't be nearly as good as they are. So, yeah, I just want to say I'm grateful that I did serve. And there are really no words to describe it until you experience it.